That's not a very fair situation there. I mean, I complained to Dean about this today, as a matter of fact. You know, KPFT changed all their whole program system around.
Right, and he shifted
We
all
all
over the
supported Dean's program through our donations. Every time they had a pledge drive, they put them into a very inopportune time.
Yeah.
And if you don't pledge to protest what they've done, it hurts Dean.
Yeah.
So we're between a rock and a hard place. We really do need to give and give generously to Dean's program.
Yeah. And there are two other announcements that I need to get to start us out this evening. The first is the University of Texas at El Paso is sponsoring a conference, multidisciplinary conference on the war on drugs. It will be in El Paso on September the 20th through 22nd of this year. And they have a web page on it, which is War on Drugs Conference, all as one word, .utep.edu. So if you think you can be in El Paso over those 2 or 3 days, take a look at their website and see if there's anything there that will interest you. They've also got links on the web page to resources, and they have put up a blog about it. And I guess while we're speaking of blogs, I should say that I have a new blog up. It's called Marijuana Musings. The address is terrellmarijuana.blogspot.com. So take a look at it, and if you see anything that's interesting or that hopefully even makes you mad, drop a comment and let's see what kind of arguments we can get started.
Good.
So how have you been lately?
We were doing fine. There's just not been very much going on politically in the general area here.
Yeah. Well, I think that politically, and this applies nationwide and locally, that the healthcare debate and the wars and the economy have just pretty well steamrolled everything else.
Well, you know, I do believe that Obama is still on our side.
Yeah.
I do believe that he is there, and we just have to pave the way during these 4 years for the outcry to get louder and louder among everyone.
Well, I think, and I've really come around to this way of thinking over several years now, that the reform is going to trickle up, I guess we could say, that this really is a grassroots or maybe roots of grass kind of revolution. And it's amazing when you talk about things being politically quiet to see how much activity there is on the state level, particularly in the legislatures with medical marijuana issues. I've been surprised at how much press the attempt to legalize marijuana in California has gotten. And I mean, this is press all over the country, not just within the state. And most of it has been favorable.
ABC poll in Los Angeles just did a poll last week, and it came out 75% in favor of outright legalization.
And I think that's, was that a nationwide poll?
That was Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yeah. I suspect that it's been a couple of years since I've seen a good nationwide poll. And even then, nationwide, it was up in the mid 40% in favor of legalization. I suspect it slipped over the 50% mark by now.
Oh, it's over. I mean, the numbers are there.
Yeah.
And it's getting our legislators attuned to it, that this is a problem we want addressed.
Well, I think that for some time, part of the real problem has been that legislators are by their very nature chickens. And they won't do anything that they're afraid will cost them a vote. And I think that what has happened is, it's two things. First is they do real good looking in their rearview mirror, and they know that in the past people have been very, very much against drugs, and they can't see ahead. And the other is, if you take a state like Texas, and most of the other states are the same way, districting has continued to give undue representation to rural areas and conservative areas, whereas the population balance is much more urban. Now, what's going to happen with redistricting following the 2010 census, I don't know. But part of it, we've got to convince legislatures to look forward, not to try to live out of their rearview mirror.
Well, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, speaking of our state, what is she going to do for us?
Absolutely nothing. I think we've got a phone call. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
What's up?
Oh, same old. Do you have a question or comment?
Huh?
You have a question or a comment?
Yeah. Question.
Okay.
We're listening.
Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
what's your
we're
question,
listening.
please? Yes, can you ask us your question, please?
Thanks. We'll try back again.
Okay. I guess he wasn't able to hear us. I mean, we ask people to turn their television down, but they should be able to hear us over the telephone.
And this is a call-in program.
Yes.
We want you to call in. We appreciate your programs, and we appreciate your comments.
And if you're the caller we just couldn't make connection with, please call back and we'll try again. But
my kids are supposed to be watching this on computer up in New England.
Okay.
Maybe they'll call tonight.
We do have streaming video on the Houston Media Access website, which is live during the broadcast, and we're also posting most of the programs on YouTube, of course, a day or two later than we broadcast. And we have links to those programs on the Drug Policy Forum of Texas webpage. And if you don't watch it when we're live and want to comment, we do have an email address where you can send an email to me, and we'll be able to respond on the next program if I don't get back to you before then. No, you were mentioning before the phone call some of the political future of Texas, and you mentioned Kay Bailey Hutchinson.
Yes.
I can't see where she has ever taken a courageous step on any program in her life.
Well, if I'm repeating the governor correctly, that he said that she's been in Senate too long and she's just totally out of touch with the people?
Well, I'm sure Governor 39% knows what it means to be in touch with the people of Texas.
Why do we continue to put people like that there?
Hold on, nope, I got my signals crossed. I think it's part of the misdistricting and the misrepresentation in the state. Of course, the governor is a statewide election, but as I say, the current governor was elected with 39% of the popular vote. You really can't call that a mandate of any kind. Speaking of that, though, it looks like Houston's Mayor White is gearing up for a run for the Senate.
Going to take Kay Bailey's
If
seat.
Kay Bailey is stepping down, that leaves that one open. Don't know if it's 2010 or if hers goes till 2012. I think it's 10. But Bill White might make an interesting run for it.
He would. He's been a good mayor.
He's been a good mayor. I have never heard him say anything directly concerned with any drug programs at all. But
I don't know where he's
he
on anything.
he seems to be a very practical, pragmatic person, and to me, that's much more important than any kind of ideological orientation.
Oh, speaking of other politics, did you watch Hardball?
No, I didn't.
This past Sunday with John Culberson?
No, I unfortunately don't have access to that kind of cable right now. It's probably a good thing. Watching John Culberson might do dangerous things to my blood pressure.
I think he was called a liar about 3 different times by the commentator.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a very moderate, low-tempered moderator to me.
I mean, Mr. Culberson wasn't going to answer any questions the way questions should be answered, and he held his feet to the fire. I was really happy about it.
Well, I'm not sure he's ever answered a question legitimately in his whole career.
No.
But he's one of the most doctrinaire of the ideological politicians in Washington.
A Jeffersonian.
No, he is far from Jeffersonian.
Well, that's what he calls himself.
Well, I don't think has ever read a word Mr. Jefferson said or wrote. And we've got to remember that Jefferson himself was not a Jeffersonian in those terms. Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, and at the whole time he was worrying and fretting and losing sleep that it was probably unconstitutional, but he said, I've got to do it anyway. And if there was ever a big government anti-states rights move, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if John really is a Jeffersonian, that would mean that he believes we should tear down all of our industry. We should certainly do away entirely with the banking and financial system, and all of us should move back to the country and become small gentlemen farmers, largely self-sustaining. That was the Jeffersonian move. And Culberson should be worried if there are too many true Jeffersonians around, because Jefferson was the one that said each generation the tree of liberty needs to be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. So if John wants to swap Jeffersonian quotes someday, I'd be more than happy to oblige him.
I would like to get him on this program one day.
Well, let's extend an invitation to him right now, John.
Yes.
You are welcome to come onto this program any date of your choosing. Just give us about 12 hours notice so that we can make sure that we don't have someone else in the way to keep you from speaking.
Really?
And we will ask you questions and expect answers to them.
Well.
Gee, how many people have we just made mad now?
Oh, well.
Yeah. So, I've been looking at some of the things on medical marijuana. And one of the things that has struck me is that as the medical marijuana movement has matured, we're seeing states outside of California that are really starting to come to grips with the distribution issue. New Mexico has passed additional laws to set up a state-controlled distribution system, and the first elements of it, I think, are going into place even as we speak. The Michigan law looks like that it's working out somewhat of a seed consumption distribution plan. Rhode Island just passed a distribution law over a gubernatorial veto.
Well, the mayor of Flint, Michigan, wants to become the grow capital of the United States for marijuana.
Okay.
He said that if it's legal, that would be a perfect fix for their local economy.
Well, there are a lot of areas of Detroit that probably could be plowed up and planted right now. The problem there is right now, if we take Attorney General Holder at his word that the feds are not going to interfere with state programs that are run according to state law, then each of the states could set up a distribution program. But Michigan couldn't become the supplier for the country because that would mean moving the stuff through interstate commerce, and that would bring them out from under Holder's protective umbrella. So I think the mayor of Flint is a couple of steps ahead of the game.
Well, we need some progressive thinkers.
Yeah.
I mean, Richard Lee in California, he's the one that's pushed for this legalization movement in California.
Yeah, and I don't like the particular version he's pushing, but he's been pushing hard for it. And he's the one that was visionary enough to start Oaksterdam University and several other endeavors as well. It's my understanding that he's now got some competition for Oaksterdam.
You were telling me.
Well, I ran into a column in the Santa Fe Reporter this last month about a group called Cannabis Tech, which is now operating in New Mexico and I think a couple of other states, doing much the same thing that Oaksterdam is doing, teaching people how to run a cannabis business, some of the legal and growing problems. But a couple of days after I read the article, I tried looking at their website, and it said, "We've had so much traffic lately, the website's crashed, it's under reconstruction," and the last time I looked, they still didn't have a new one up, so I'm reluctant to say much about it other than it seems to be out there and it seems to be functioning. So, you know, any other business, when it develops to the stage that California has done, we start having the idea that you need trained professional management as well as dedicated workers at the bottom. So,
well, California's system is set up with the everyday person in mind. People can actually become a businessman, and the competition is fierce out there.
Yes and no. The competition is fierce. It's surprising how many dispensaries have opened up, but the competition is not fierce where it should be. And this is that the actual growing still seems to be in the hands of the old black market criminal outlaws. And part of the problem is that this means that even medicinal marijuana is still costing $200 an ounce or up.
Oh, it's close to $400.
200 to 400, yeah. And some of it even more. What I would like to see, and I'm surprised I haven't seen it yet, would be for at least one true co-op to organize itself in California, where the members themselves get together, provide the capital and even part of the labor, find the land or the building, set up their own grow operation, provide their own buds to their own dispensary, and see if they can't reduce that $200 an ounce and start some actual competition.
Oh, prices are ridiculous. Absurd. I mean, I don't know how anybody can afford it.
Yeah. Well, I know I ran into one news story quoting a price out of Czechoslovakia for legal marijuana at 85 cents an ounce.
That sounds about where it should be.
That fits right in with my calculation based on comparative products, where tea's about $1 an ounce, coffee's about 35 cents an ounce. I've been saying for a couple of years that legal marijuana should be, for just average run-of-the-mill weed, about $1 an ounce. Now, if you want some of the fancy ultra-hybrid, sure, it's going to cost you more. But $1 an ounce is about what it should be on the open market. Anything else people pay is a tax imposed by the Prohibition law.
Yes. And swag is just garbage.
Well,
it's garbage, and every time...
Swag was garbage 40 years ago, yeah.
But what's made it worse is there's 4,000 people have died this year in Mexico. 4,000.
Yeah.
What's that, about 60% ahead of last year?
Yeah. And it's all caused by money. And money is generated by the Prohibition laws. The last figures I saw showed that American drug money was contributing about $20 billion a year to Mexico's economy. That made it one of their big four foreign exchange, right in the same ballparks as Pemex with petroleum sales, tourism, and remittances from Mexican nationals living overseas. Now, $20 billion a year is plenty of money to fight over, and it's plenty of money to buy machine guns to fight with.
I've seen pictures in the newspaper of huge rooms stacked this deep in $100 bills.
Yeah, yeah. It used to be that they would occasionally stop trucks headed for the border where a whole U-Haul truck would be stacked up with money inside. The smugglers have gotten a little more sophisticated. But if you could reduce that $20 billion a year by 90%, that knocks it down to about $200 million a year. And by the time you pay the expenses for growing the crops, processing the cocaine, paying the help to move it, then you're talking profit margins about like any other business. And let's face it, the cartels are not in any position to compete with Safeway or Walgreens.
No.
It's just like Al Capone could not compete with Anheuser-Busch. And beer's so cheap now, we don't see people fighting over beer distributorships with machine guns.
Nope.
It's exactly the same situation. The war in Mexico, like the war in Colombia before that, is strictly about dollars.
And Governor Perry, you could help stop it very easily.
Yeah.
Stop the prohibition within the state, legalize it, tax it, regulate it, and keep it away from children.
Well, you know, I had another one of my wild ideas on that. I think we should keep it away from children. And I think probably setting age 18 as a limit is a good idea. But I've been looking at what some states have been doing with driver's licenses. And a lot of them have age 18 as the driving age. But if a teenager completes a driver's training course and passes an exam, they can get a provisional license at age 16 that allows them to drive only in daytime hours without any other people in the car. And I've been thinking, If we had an age 18 law for possession of marijuana, what would happen if at age 16 kids could take a course somewhat more rigorous than a defensive driving course, pass a test on it, and get a state ID card with a magnetic stripe on it to keep up with what's going on, that would allow them to buy no more than a half an ounce a week. Then you'd give them a chance to learn how to use it, and not like when I was a kid buying bootleg hooch when I was in high school. And since you had to buy a fifth at a time, you drank a fifth at a time. So, you know, there's a lot of things we can do if we bring it under the legal regulatory umbrella that's just completely hands-off, since we shoved everything outside the fence.
Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. I just don't know what to say. I just lose my thought because it's just so asinine that the things keep going the way they're going.
And the sick part about it is none of it's new. Big hysteria across the country this week about some academics that have run tests and found traces of cocaine on all of the United States currency. Well, the first time those tests were run were back in the 1980s, and there was cocaine on all of the money at that time. It's just that you don't have to dig very far into what's gone on before till you see what's wrong with what's going on now.
Really?
Okay. They're telling us it's time to take a break, so we'll take a break and see you in a couple of minutes.
What if the reason you couldn't pick up your little brother was that you got arrested for smoking cigarettes? Keep cigarettes legal. Okay, we're back, and we were talking about the way some things just keep repeating themselves time after time. And I noticed one of the big stories this last week was they were accusing members or employees of one of the Mexican cartels, unnamed, as starting the big 600,000 plus acre brush fire in California right now. And for 4 or 5 years now,
The California media has been giving us a steady drumbeat of marijuana growers damaging the environment and destroying the environment. And of course, for 2 decades we've been hearing how dangerous to the environment and to the people around meth labs have been, and meth labs blow up and they cause fires. You know, it's true, a meth lab gives you a very nasty little spot, but probably all of the meth labs in the country aren't as big as any one of the EPA's brown sites caused by chemical companies before 1970. And before that, we used to hear complaints about the Columbia cocaine refiners that were spoiling the environment by dumping kerosene and acid into the rainforest streams. And you know, the funny thing is, way back before that, in the 1920s, in both New York and Chicago, and I don't know about other places, the bootleggers were hiring individual families to set up small gallon to 5 gallon a week distilleries in their apartment bathrooms, paying them $5 a week for it. And you know what? Those little bathroom stills had a nasty habit of catching fire or blowing up and burning down whole tenements and hurting people. When was the last time you heard of an explosion or a fire at, the Johnny Walker Distillery or the Jim Beam Distillery?
You don't.
You don't. When was the last time you heard of a pharmaceutical lab manufacturing methamphetamines legally, which are now used by prescription for children with attention deficit disorders? How many of those legal methamphetamine labs have caused environmental harm? None of them, because legal businessmen follow the rules, they're policed to make sure that they abide by the regulations. How many tobacco farmers have caused environmental damage?
Oh, yeah.
Not many, because they're under supervision as well. Even where I grew up out in Lubbock with irrigated cotton land, when I was a kid, every field you drove by, there would be irrigation water running out into the bar ditches. It doesn't happen anymore because they're regulated. It used to be cattle feedlots, polluted everything because rainwater washed all of the manure out of the feedlots into the water. Doesn't happen anymore because they're regulated. A marijuana farmer operating within the law, under the eyes of the Department of Agriculture and the EPA, would be just as clean and just as respectable as his next door neighbor who's growing broccoli or tomatoes.
Right.
Yeah, and it's, as Clayton said, it's the same old thing time after time. We saw it with alcohol in the 20s. We saw it with cocaine in the 1970s. We saw it with methamphetamine in the 1990s. We're hearing it about marijuana right now.
Now, I wonder.
Okay.
You brought it into my mind. All these young children with ADD, HD,
yeah,
they're giving all these...
About 9% of all boys and about 6% of all girls.
Yeah, are they making future drug addicts? Are they giving them a gateway drug?
One of my students several years ago tracked down a study. And what they found was this, that you could divide children into 3 groups. Those who were normal, but who used stimulants that they got from their friends with attention deficit disorders. those properly diagnosed with attention deficit disorders who were receiving medication, and those that had attention deficit disorders but were not being medicated. Of the three groups, as they traced them into adulthood, those who had attention deficit disorders but were not medicated had a very high level of problems with drug abuse. The normal kids who were using the stuff just for fun had some problems, but the lowest use of abusive use as adults was by the students who had been properly diagnosed and prescribed medication. The interesting thing nowadays, and I've seen a couple of studies on this, is what I guess we could call the post-ADHD generation. That those that were college kids who watched their classmates taking Ritalin and Adderall and all, when they got to college, started either buying illegally or getting prescriptions from their doctors to regularly take small doses for what they call brain boosters. And right now we've got young and even middle-aged executive and professional class people that have been taking small regulated doses of stimulants for up to about 2 decades. They are pretty sure it has given them a boost in performance and a competitive edge. And so far there have been no ill effects from it. Of course, even when I was a kid, there were truck drivers who had used amphetamines regularly their whole careers. Military have always had access to amphetamines with no apparent long-term results. So.
Jet pilots use it. Military jet pilots.
Yeah. Over 60% of the Gulf War sorties were flown with air crews using amphetamines. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Good evening. What do you foresee for happening in Mexico the next year now that they've legalized all drugs in small amounts?
Okay.
No, they haven't.
That's an interesting question. Actually, they have decriminalized small amounts of virtually anything.
He signed the bill.
I believe so.
I heard that he had let it.
He had let it slide, but it was one he had pushed originally. I think he kind of wiggled out from under the U.S. I think it'll make no difference because the drug wars and the violence in Mexico are not based on Mexican consumption of drugs.
It's based on ours.
They're based on sucking $20 billion a year out of the United States. The only way to solve the Mexican drug wars is to legalize drugs in the United States and chop the illegal money off.
Right. It's the only way.
Yeah. But no, and Bolivia is taking steps to increase the legal use of coca, for instance. They're coming out, repeating history once again with coca-fortified soft drinks and teas, just like the original Coca-Cola. They're coming out with coca toothpaste. A lot of things passed. Once again, that's like the United States 100 years ago. But they are encouraging domestic use of the low-potency coca as opposed to the refined cocaine. And there seems to be a fairly strong movement all across Latin America, South America in particular, to at least decriminalize personal possession and use of small amounts. It's almost universal in Europe now.
Well, Portugal has had a wonderful history with their decriminalization.
Yeah, and Italy, to some extent, has done the same thing, but Italian politics and policing is so mixed up, it's sometimes hard to tell what's really happening there. Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland, France, all basically have either decriminalized marijuana or turned a blind eye to possession.
I understand the European market is putting pressure on the Netherlands to tighten up the coffee shops.
Mainly it's been the French. And the French have been much more reluctant than any of the others to allow decriminalization. But the problem has been narco-tourists. Apparently there are sometimes major traffic jams on the French and Belgian and German borders with the Netherlands of their residents driving in to pick up some weed from the coffee houses. Apparently the ferries running back and forth to England are just practically loaded to the gunnels with people over to get their weed. So yeah, the Netherlands has come under a lot of pressure from, as I say, particularly France, which has not gone along with the easing up as much as the other European countries have.
Well, Canada just stopped tightening up on the drug laws. The Senate just put the bill that the Prime Minister wanted through.
Yeah, that's the Canadian government in the past few years. They replaced what had been a liberal establishment for a long time with a conservative prime minister and majority in parliament. They pretty much were going along with the Bush administration and trying to fall more in line with the American drug laws. But the central government in Canada does not have nearly the strength and powers that the federal government in this country does. The provinces have been really pretty reluctant to go along with it, so what's going to happen there is still somewhat up in the air, but it's beginning to look like, I think, that the ascendancy of the conservatives in the federal government up there is diminishing. So,
and Toronto and Montreal are opening up safe injection sites like Vancouver.
Yeah, safe injection, and there has been talk, and I don't know how far it's going, of even following a Swiss model of providing free heroin to actual addicts. And that has been one of the most amazingly successful programs that's been instituted anywhere. The Swiss free heroin program for addicts is now over 10 years old. Do you know how many overdose deaths they've had in that country since it was started?
None.
0. Not a single overdose death. Petty property crime has gone way, way down. Unlicensed street corner type prostitution is way, way down. It's been just one of those things that it's really amazing how successful it's been. And several other countries are looking at it. Of course, Germany has had safe injection sites for a long time as well. And England, in effect, by managing addicts under national health care, has been providing heroin to addicts since the 1920s. So,
I don't understand why they get people addicted to methadone. Why don't they just keep them on heroin?
Well,
they're supplying it one way or the other.
There are 2 or 3 reasons. The first is in the 1960s, when methadone therapy first started out, it was sold as being a drug without the high. That you could dose someone on methadone, they wouldn't get any kick out of it at all. All it would do would be to prevent withdrawal. That's not true, but it made a good sales story, and it fits in with the Puritan mindset of America that you don't do things that are fun.
What happened to Viagra?
The second thing, well, that's strictly for procreation, haven't you heard? The second thing about methadone is it's taken orally, so we don't have to mess with needles. And the third thing is it's extremely slow acting, and it has a long half-life, so that you can give one dose of methadone a day as opposed to a shot of heroin every 4 to 6 hours around the clock. So the idea about the methadone clinics is someone on their way to work can stop by the clinic, take the day's dose, be good for the next 24 hours, and do it again the next morning. And that can't be done with heroin. And the problem is, in some places, heroin maintenance works fine. In other places, it doesn't, and it all depends really on what kind of local regulations are in place. In some places, the police are so suspicious of it that they very, very grudgingly treat the methadone clinics as more drug bootleggers that we have to keep under, just totally under our thumb all the way. There they've got problems. Others, it works much better. In most cases now, after someone has proved themselves after a couple of 3 months on the program, they're even allowed to take home a week's worth of doses at a time, up to a month some places. And some of it does leak out onto the streets. Yeah, you don't get much high, but there's a little bit. And if you're about to Jones out because there's no heroin, it beats not having anything. The last fight, and it's about gone now, one of the things that they used to originally sell methadone was that it could be used as a device to taper off and wean someone away from the drugs. So we often hear of methadone withdrawal therapy as opposed to maintenance, but I think most of the doctors and most of the methadone administrators treat it as straight maintenance now. I've talked to some people that have gone through programs here locally. If they want to taper off and try to quit, the clinics are glad to help them out with it and even make arrangements for the actual final withdrawal stage to help them through that with an inpatient facility for a week or so. But there's no real pressure on anyone to do anything other than maintain. But it's, as I say, it had a bunch of advantages, especially in the 70s. And what most people don't realize is that Richard Nixon is largely responsible for the methadone programs in this country. His original war on drugs was based on three legs like a tripod. One was source suppression, not letting it into the country. The second was going after dealers. And the third was therapy for the users. And his first budget actually had about equal funding for them. That's gone way down since then. His first, the equivalent of the drug czar, it was really different then, was actually a doctor from Chicago who was one of the real pioneers in methadone therapy. But that didn't last long in Washington. So,
isn't it amazing that we have so many leaders that we wonder about?
And some of them we know about.
I would like to remind you again, this is a call-in program. We appreciate your calls. Feel free to call in. Numbers on the screen.
Yep, and it's one of the few known ways to make me stop talking for a few minutes. But this is your show. And your calls, comments, emails are the only way we know of what you want. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd just like to bring up a topic.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember a few months ago where the Olympic gold medal swimmer was pictured at a party with a bong.
Yeah.
And they took a few of his endorsements and I guess slapped him on the wrist. He's back at it, winning races, winning again, and not affected at all by what happened at the party.
Okay. Thank you. He's speaking, of course, Michael Phelps, the
Yes.
outstanding Olympic swimmer, who was pictured a couple of months ago inhaling from a bong at a party. Kellogg's, I believe,
They
jerked his
dropped him.
endorsement almost immediately. Some officious South Carolina district attorney started going around trying to arrest people to get some evidence to go after Phelps. Couldn't find anything he could use. You know, I'm not sure I would recommend marijuana as part of a training regimen for any sport, but it's certainly less harmful than, say, the beer and hot dogs Babe Ruth trained on, or the steroids that most of the baseball players have used.
You know, if you're an athlete, well, let's take a hockey player. Gets banged up a lot.
Yeah.
Football players, they get banged up a lot. Basketball players, they usually don't drug test during their seasons.
About 10 years ago, when it may be 15, basketball, pro basketball had a big scandal with a number of the players being caught or admitting to using marijuana during the season. And I just recently read a comment from one of the basketball players from that time who said that during the game, you get bunged up, you get stiff, you get sore, you get hurt, you're revved up, you're tense, you're on edge when the game is over. Marijuana is good for the pains and the stiffness. It helps take care of the tension and relax you. And unlike alcohol, it leaves you in good shape to play again the next day. So,
well, wasn't that the same thing with the people who built our railroads? The Chinese?
oh yeah.
They used heroin, opium.
Well, they used opium, but the Central Pacific heading east from California, most of their laborers were imported from China. The Union Pacific headed west, used Irish. The Union Pacific had a lot of drinking, a lot of fights, a lot of property destruction, and a lot of missed days. The opium-smoking Chinese stayed right on the job. Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Yes. I was calling, I was curious. It seems like you have a lot of knowledge. I thought maybe you could articulate some of the reasons behind this. You know, me and a lot of other professionals, we would love to, you know, smoke marijuana sometimes in just a casual format. But if anything at all happens at work, even though I'm not under any influence at work, the very first thing is, you know, a drug test, which I'm wondering how this is. It just seems kind of ridiculous to me. Like it's just a scheme to say that that's what caused the incident when that's not what.
Okay, we're about to run out of time, so let me try to answer you. In the mid-'80s, when Congress really got hot and bothered about drugs, they changed the law, and one of the things they did was they required insurance companies to give lower workers' comp insurance rates to companies that instituted drug testing policies. And they set it so that the reduction in rates save the companies more than the drug test costs. That's where the drug testing came from. Now, excuse me. The reason why it continues, if you take Texas as an example, we are what's known as an employment at will state, so that unless you have a written employment contract specifying how long your job will last, your employer can fire you at any time
For any reason.
for any reason, so long as it doesn't violate one of the big discrimination no-nos like race, sex, age, national origin. So he can have a drug test policy and you've got no recourse at all. Unless, of course, you happen to be a policeman or a fireman where you've got a strong union contract and that union contract completely bars your employer from ever using a drug test of any kind. So if you want to toke up at home before you go to work the next day and not worry about drug tests,
Become a cop.
become a cop. That's probably the best advice I can give you.
Well, they're people too. They're just like everybody else. I mean, I live in a good neighborhood. I live in a very good neighborhood, and I look out my front yard. I see 12 houses, and 5 of them don't smoke.
Okay.
And these are engineer-type people.
Nationwide statistics, around 46% of the adults in the country have at least tried marijuana. This is your show. It's your country. They're your politicians. The only way that you can determine what goes on in this show or in Austin or in Washington or even downtown in City Hall is to let your employees and representatives in those places know how you feel. So write, call, visit in person, or stand out on the street corner and yell that you're mad as hell and you're not going to take it anymore. It's your show and your country. Take charge and roll it.
That's the program.
Our present policy of drug prohibition is hopeless. It is hopeless. It will never get better. Literally, victory today is being defined as slowing down the pace of defeat.
We ought to listen to science and medicine when it comes to whether marijuana or any other substance has a medical benefit.
The fact that marijuana is the